Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us once again. My name's Larry DuBois, and we're going to do our ongoing study in the book of Acts. And before we get started, I'd like to make just a brief announcement. This is the first part of March now, and we are going into a time, hopefully I'm going to get my hip replacement surgery where they go in there and reconstruct it. What I have had, it's gone bad anyway. And hopefully that's this month. There's a few things that it hinges on. It could still be canceled at this point, but if that goes through, which I'm hoping and praying, and by the way, you could pray for me. That would be great. If you guys could pray for me that this would... I'm open to a total miraculous healing from the Lord without surgery. However, I'm pursuing this surgery to correct the problem, and hopefully I can just at least walk normal again. Anyway, that is coming up here on the 22nd, Lord willing. And if that happens, we may get through the rest of the book of Acts. We may not. I'm going to try to do a couple ahead. Anyway, without further ado, we're going to go ahead and get started. And if you notice, my cup of coffee here is blue, and that's why you can see through it. I use a blue screen rather than a green screen. It's just kind of interesting. But let's put that aside. And we're going to get our little slideshow up here for our notes. There we go. This is Acts chapter 25, verses 1 through 27. It's episode number 46. You can always catch a past broadcast on the website, either an audio podcast or it might be available in video. I only started videotaping probably since maybe the last 8 episodes or so. Anyway, we're coming to you from Sacramento, California. It is Monday, March 7th in the year of our Lord 2022. And I've already got prayed up, and so let's go ahead and get started. I've entitled this one, Paul Appeals to Caesar. And we're going to go ahead and get started with a little brief review of chapter 24. We left off, of course, with Felix procrastinating on Paul's case and wanting to do the Jews a favor, left him bound. And so as we introduce chapter 25, we got this fellow named Festus who succeeds Felix. And if you're like me, I get the guys confused. I forget who's who. But this Festus, now, he's the second guy. He says, replacement. Well, he meets with the Jews. He induces Paul to go to Jerusalem to stand trial, where Paul refuses, and that's where he appeals to Caesar. And his request, of course, is granted. And in the meantime, he's examined by King Agrippa. So that's basically it. We'll look at the outline. It's just similar. Festus replaces Felix. Festus meets with the Jewish leaders. Festus wants Paul to go to Jerusalem for trial. However, Paul refuses and appeals to Caesar. And then he has that famous saying in the video of him in the book of Acts. It says, "You've appealed to Caesar, and to Caesar you shall go." And so that's what happens. King Agrippa comes to town, hears Paul's case, and then Agrippa and Festus ponder official charges to bring to the emperor, as Paul is basically a political prisoner, if you will. He's bound based on religion, not any normal crime, such as robbery or treason or anything like that. Okay, let's go ahead and get started in the first 5 verses there. We'll break it down. More plotting of the Jews is what I've entitled this little subheading. Now, when Festus had come to the province, after 3 days he went up from Caesarea to Jerusalem. Then the high priest and the chief men of the Jews informed him against Paul, and they petitioned him, asking a favor against him that he would summon him to Jerusalem, and while they lay in ambush along the road to kill him. But Festus answered that Paul should be kept at Caesarea, and that he himself was going there shortly. Therefore, he said, let those who have authority among you go down with me and accuse this man to see if there's any fault in him. And so he wasn't likely persuaded as much as Felix was. He was a man susceptible to corruption. It does say that he ends up doing the Jews a favor, or tries to do them a favor. But it sounds like he didn't want any real part of this ambush again. It's like a repeat. They wanted to wait and kill him, and he would have been part of that. And he's saying, no, Paul's going to be held at Caesarea. Look, you guys, if you got anything that you want to accuse him of, those who are official among you, come down with me and you can charge him there and examine him to see if there's anything, that he could find fault in. And so now the Jews are in jeopardy of having all these charges dropped all of a sudden. So they were, very instrumental in trying to convince him that rule in their favor. But in God's sovereign, providential work in the life of Paul and the gospel there, that wasn't going to happen. Paul was, in fact, going to go to Rome, and he was going to go before the emperor, and he would end up dying on another day. He wasn't going to die at the hands of these guys. So the next section, verse 6 through 8, it said, when he had remained among them more than 10 days, that would have been Festus, he went down to Caesarea. So he came to Caesarea, then he went back up to Jerusalem, met with the Jews, and now he comes down after 10 days to Caesarea there, taking over for Felix. It says, the next day, sitting on the judgment seat, he commanded Paul to be brought in. Now when he had come, the Jews who had come down from Jerusalem stood about and laid many serious complaints against Paul, which they could not prove. While he answered for himself, neither against the law of the Jews, nor against the temple, nor against Caesar, have I offended in anything at all. And so this is basically a repeat of earlier accusations, going back several times in several settings over the last previous chapters that we covered. And, of course, Paul's defense is that, look, I didn't break any law of the Jews against the temple. That was one of the things they said. He defiled the temple. They accused him of bringing a Gentile in there, and he didn't really bring any Gentiles in. They were seen together in town, so they just assumed that Paul brought him in there, but he didn't bring him in there. And then, of course, he has nothing against Caesar, against the Roman government, because the Romans were generally interested in crimes against the state, if you will. And remember back when they were trying Jesus, and before Pilate, and especially in Luke's version, where they come up and they say, this man, he deceives the people. He says he's a king. He won't pay taxes. And that, they were trying to convince Pilate that he had crimes against the state, not paying taxes, causing a rebellion. If you're saying you're a king, well, they had no king but Caesar, right? So to say you were a king, then that meant that you were, you had competition. Well, they put that down real fast. But that was a lot of the trumped up charges had to do with when it was convenient for the Jews to use that against these guys to the Roman government, that they wouldn't, that they were somehow breaking Roman law. And of course, Paul right here, he says, I haven't offended them in anything at all. He didn't do anything against the Romans, and he was a Roman citizen. Okay, moving along, verse 9 through 12. But Festus, wanting to do the Jews a favor, answered Paul and said, are you willing to go up to Jerusalem, there be judged before me concerning these things? So Paul said, I stand at Caesar's judgment seat where I ought to be judged. To the Jews I've done no wrong, as you very well know. For I am an offender. If I am an offender, or have committed anything deserving of death, I do not object to dying. But if there is nothing in these things of which men accuse me, No one can deliver me to them. I appeal to Caesar." Then Festus, when he had conferred with the council, answered, "You have appealed to Caesar? To Caesar you shall go." Okay. Well, it is a little unclear if Festus, it says here he wanted to do the Jews a favor. So to bring him back up to Jerusalem, was he going to allow those guys to jump him and kill him? Or, was he going to get him up there and then when they're on their home turf, of course, then he would rule in favor of those guys? It's a little unclear. I don't know, because he could rule in favor of the Jews right here, But I think it had to do with jurisdiction. I think that Paul, had he been brought back to Jerusalem, he wouldn't have been able to appeal to Caesar. He wouldn't have been in Caesar's court. He would have been in the Jewish council's court and subject to their laws and their protocol. And of course, that would have railroaded him guilty for sure. So I think that was more like it. I think Festus just thought, well, I'll do him a favor by getting him back up into their territory and under their jurisdiction. They'll convict him and they can have him. They'll do what they will with him. But he was a little perplexed there. He could not force Paul. And probably under Roman law, because Paul was a citizen, couldn't say, well, you're going up there whether you like it or not. You kind of thought, well, why didn't he do that? And so he just said, are you willing? Basically, hoping Paul would say yes, but he didn't. He was quite emphatic, saying, "I stand at Caesar's judgment seat where I ought to be judged. To the Jews I've done no wrong, as you very well know." And so he was challenging Festus and saying, look, I hadn't done anything wrong, that these guys have trumped up these charges because they don't like my preaching against them. And he says, this is kind of shocking here. He says, look, if I'm an offender, if I've done anything deserving of death, I'll die. He was willing to die if he was guilty. And he says, I ain't guilty. Look, if I've, that's not a lot of people. They go to court, they try to get out of the fact that if they've done anything, they're trying to squirm out of what they've done. But his case and his life was a wide open book. He had nothing to hide. He had God at his back, to say for sure. He understood, and he could move in faith because he understood that God had promised him that he was going to go to Rome. And so he wasn't going to agree to go down to Jerusalem or up to Jerusalem. So his appeal to Caesar, Festus, of course, he conferred with the council there, and as a citizen, you had a right to appeal. And many of our laws are kind of set in a similar constructure of appellate system that a lot of these things we get from prior governments in the world, the Roman Empire, the Greek Empire. A lot of these things are the ideas. A lot of the Old Testament laws of the Jews are in our books today regarding certain situations. For example, the concept that if a man breaks into your house and you catch him doing it at the time and you strike him and he dies, you can't really get in trouble for that. That's on that guy. His blood's on his own head. But if for some reason he escapes your house and then you track him down the next day, then you can't kill him. It's too late. You got to catch him in the act, and he's got to be threatening you, that sort of thing. Well, a lot of that is taken right out of the Old Testament, some of these laws that are on our books today. But this appellate system was there, and he had a right to appeal to Caesar, so that's what he did. So let's see what happens. Moving along in verse 13, and after some days, King Agrippa and Bernice came to Caesarea and to greet Festus. Now, typically these the king had a certain jurisdiction over the area. He probably came there to greet him because he was new, taking over for Felix. He was probably like, that's what politicians do. Oh, you're the new guy. Okay, I'm going to come and I'm going to, greet you in your new office and give you, pat on the back or whatever. So that's what they were there for. And when they'd been there many days, Festus laid Paul's case before the king, saying, "There is a certain man left a prisoner by Felix, about whom the chief priests and the elders of the Jews informed me when I was in Jerusalem, asking for a judgment against him. To them I answered, it is not the custom of the Romans to deliver any man to destruction before the accused meets the accusers face to face and has opportunity to answer for himself concerning a charge against him." Okay, so there we got some more information. For Festus to say, "Oh yeah, let's just bring Paul up there," he informed the Jews, "Look, I'm bound by the Roman law here. I can't just turn this guy over to you. It's the custom that they can't deliver him over to the Jews until there's a trial, until it's a fair trial, basically. He has the opportunity to meet his accuser face to face and answer the charges." Okay, so it sounds like that got him out of it, so there's some more information there. So basically, now he's presenting this prisoner Paul, telling King Agrippa about what's going on. And therefore, when they had come together, verse 17, without any delay, the next day I sat on the judgment seat, commanded the man to be brought in. And when the accuser stood up, they brought no accusation against him of such thing as I supposed, but had some questions against him about their own religion, about a certain Jesus who had died, whom Paul affirmed to be alive. And because I was uncertain of such questions, I asked whether he was willing to go to Jerusalem and there be judged concerning these matters. But when Paul appealed to be reserved for the decision of Augustus, I commanded him to be kept till I could send him to Caesar. All right, so there's some more information there now. It looks like when they had this last hearing and they brought these accusations against Paul, he thought it was going to be something more tangible, something more against probably the Roman government, like he broke some law. And it says in verse 19, but it was about their own religion and about a man named Jesus who Paul said was alive, and so he was uncertain about it. So he didn't want to really deal with these wranglings about the religion and about the different aspects of all that. So he was, probably thinking, well, it's easier just to send him up to Jerusalem if Paul was willing to go and get him out of my hair. I don't want to have to judge these issues of their religion. Well, anyway, it turned out he appealed there, and he's telling them this. Now, this Augustus, that's the Caesar that was in power at the time, Caesar Augustus. Caesar, we think of Julius Caesar. Caesar's not the... I used to think it was like Julius Caesar, that's his last name. Caesar is more like the office. For example, like the president. We would say President Lincoln or President Johnson or whoever's president. It's not an individual name, but it is the title of the office they hold. And Caesar was more or less the title of the office. Another name, of course, was the emperor. And he basically was the dictator. And they did have a senate, and they had some other things, but this guy had a lot of power, this Augustus Caesar. So then Agrippa said to Festus, starting in verse 22 there, I also would like to hear the man myself. Tomorrow, he said, you shall hear him. So this intrigued King Agrippa, and of course this was told Paul several times since his conversion, that he was going to be brought before kings and people in authority to bear witness. And so this is no, happenstance. this is something that God has set up. But in the natural realm, of course, Agrippa and Bernice, his wife there, I guess, are there on official business to greet Festus in his new position. And so while he's there, you might as well hear this guy. So they have a kind of a special hearing since Agrippa's there. And it says that the next day when Agrippa and Bernice had come with great pomp and had entered the auditorium with commanders and the prominent men of the city at Festus' command, Paul was brought in. And Festus said, "King Agrippa and all the men who are here present with us, you see this man about whom the whole assembly of the Jews petitioned me, both at Jerusalem and here, crying out that he was not fit to live any longer." And so this was the first thing that after they come in, it says with great pomp and a lot of ceremonies, this King Agrippa, and they get everybody in place. They bring Paul in, and we're going to find out later he's bound in chains, but he comes in, and Festus announces that, you know, this is the guy that had been petitioned several times, both here up in Jerusalem, that he's not even fit to live. So they were very perplexed about this Paul. And then finishing up there in Acts 25, 26 and 27, it says, "I have nothing certain to write to my Lord concerning him. Therefore I have brought him out before you, and especially before you, King Agrippa, so that after the examination has taken place, I may have something to write, for it seems me unreasonable to send a prisoner and not specify the charges against him." And so he couldn't really send him up there and say, well, you know, this is a matter of the Jewish religion and he's having problems, because the same thing would have happened. Caesar would have probably sent him back and said, "Why are you sending him up here? This doesn't have anything to do with Roman law." So they were trying to find a fitting charge to bring against Paul, so that they could tell Caesar that, hey, I got a prisoner here, and this is his charge against him. It has to be something that is worthy to put down on paper, if you will, to be able to bring that up against when he goes up to see Caesar. So he was hoping that after King Agrippa examined him, and they could talk it over and then come up with something. And so anyway, as we go into next chapter, next week or next time, chapter 26, we're going to see the bulk part of that chapter is going to be Paul's testimony. King Agrippa, I think it starts out by saying he permits Paul to speak, and so Paul goes on quite a long discourse and brings the gospel to King Agrippa and all who were hearing in that courtroom that day. So until we meet again, my friends, that is the end of today's lesson. I hope you enjoyed this video, and God bless you, and we'll see you next time.